Hi, this is Linda Pritchett, and I'm here at the Capitol in the House chamber for the Georgia State of the State address by Governor Nathan Deal. And these are the senators that are walking in, our Georgia senators. Senator Underman in the red. And my senator, Senator Don Feller James, Senator Freddie Powell in the yellow, Senator Gloria Butler in the pink and black, Senator Gail Davenport in the cream, my friend Senator Harbison in the blue suit, the handsome gentleman right there, Senator, let's see, Valencia City, I'm trying to find her. Senator Valencia City saying hi to Representative Lee. And this is the House chamber, which is a larger chamber than the Senate chamber. So during the State of the State address, the Senate comes into the House. And it's a joint, it'll be a joint chamber today. And over here is the Speaker of the House, Mr. Ralston. And he's there with Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, who is the President of the Senate. Ralston is on the right with the black, and Cagle is wearing the purple top. This is like a big party. This is a wonderful occasion. And normally the State of the State address, there's Representative Patty Bentley in the purple, somebody's hugging her. Normally the State of the State address takes place after the State of the Union address, which our Honorable President Barack Obama did so marvelously last night. So everybody now is shaking hands and seeing each other. This is the third day of the legislative session, and so everyone, because people basically stay in their chambers normally, now they're all getting a chance to mix and mingle and say hi, how you doing, you know, what's going on, you know, just talk about a little small talk before the governor comes in. Is the Honorable Representative Abel Mabel, smiling, cheesing. Hey Abel Mabel, we see you, we see you. And over here is the audience. We're actually in the gallery, so all these people up here in the gallery, this section here that I'm pointing out is the governor's guests. These are the guests of the governor. Over here, turn back to me. Everyone here, kind of where I'm at, these are the guests of the speaker, and these guests are guests of the representatives. And this on the wall is the roll call, if you can see. Basically, all the representatives' names are here, and they do a roll call to see who is present. But this is an extremely festive occasion where the governor will go over the budget the different legislation that he'll be focusing on. See, Representative Mabry, that's my representative. He's looking up, and he's with somebody, and they're waving. And here in the yellow is my good friend, Representative Lynn Riley. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Lynn Smith. Lynn Riley is actually what is a former representative.
This chamber will please come to order. This time the chair wants to admit to the chamber the judiciary, the justices of the Georgia Supreme Court, Chief Justice Hugh P. Thompson, and the judges of the Court of Appeals of Georgia, Chief Judge Sarah L. Doyle.
And here are the judges that are arriving. These are the Supreme Court judges and the judges with the Court of Appeals. And they come in and shake hands with everyone. Judge Benham. Supreme Court judge. And that in the lilac is Representative Stacey Abrams. She is our minority leader for the House. And that's Representative Calvin Smyrie. We call him the Dean. He is the Chairman Emeritus of the House. There is Representative Virgil Flood, which was my representative before redistricting and reapportionment. Thank you everyone for joining.
All right, I'm going to ask our guests as they enter the floor.
Thank you for joining. What you're seeing is the State of the State address in the state of Georgia.
For branches of government to collide here this morning. At this time, it is an honor for me to recognize in the gallery the constitutional officers of the state of Georgia. If you'd stand and let us welcome you.
The constitutional officers include the Secretary of State, the Attorney General,
friend and colleague and ally, the Speaker Pro Tem of this House, Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones. A friend that I have served with in public life for many, many years. I tried to train him when he came to the other side of the building a few years ago. Please welcome the President of the Senate and Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Casey Cagle.
He's really such a nice guy.
The President Pro Tem of the Senate, my friend Senator David Schaefer. Pleasure to recognize in the gallery the First Lady of the Senate, Ms. Nita Cagle. And the person that I am very, very proud of, she makes us look better than we are, and she's a true public servant. The First Lady of Georgia, Sandra Deal. Mr. Doorkeeper.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Nathan Deal, Governor of this great state of Georgia, his committee of escort, and distinguished guests await entrance to the House chamber.
Mr. Doorkeeper, please allow the Governor of Georgia, his committee of escort, and distinguished guests access to the House chamber.
Governor Deal shake my representative neighbor's hand. Thank you for the hearts. If you like what you're seeing, please tap the screen to give hearts. And our governor is making his way to the podium as he prepares to address the state of Georgia. And that is Representative Dewey McClain down here. He's from District 100. And he is actually a retired NFL player. Thank you for joining. What you are seeing now is Governor Nathan Deal, who is approaching the podium to give the State of the State address to the state of Georgia.
Members of the House and Senate, this joint session will please come to order. Clerk will read the caption to a resolution.
House Resolution 967 by Representative Burns, the 159th, a resolution calling a joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate for the purpose of hearing a message from the governor, inviting the justices of the Supreme Court and the judges of the Court of Appeals to be present at the joint session and for other purposes.
It is my honor today to introduce the Governor of Georgia, a friend for many, many years, an distinguished and outstanding record of public service, and in my view, a great, great governor. He has made us better as a state through criminal justice reform. He has made us more successful by leading an economic charge that has brought jobs to every community in this state in huge numbers. And he's preparing our future by committing himself in a passionate way to improving education. And I want to pledge to him today my friendship and my allegiance to his agenda as we continue to make this the greatest state in the greatest country on the face of the earth. Please welcome to this podium the Governor of Georgia, Governor Nathan Deal.
Speaker Pro Tem Jones, constitutional officers, members of the General Assembly, members of the judiciary, my fellow Georgians. Every year, during this second week in January, we gather in this chamber of the People's House to assess the condition of our ship of state. We review its travel log for the prior year. We inventory its store of resources. We evaluate the effectiveness of its crew. We plan its journey for the coming year. And we attempt to forecast the weather and the condition of the seas that it must traverse. Like mariners of old, we consult our charts. We plan how to best avoid the rocky shoals that would damage our vessel and jeopardize the safety of our crew. But after we conclude our planning and are ready to set sail on our annual journey, what do we do if the wind is not blowing? Or worse, what if it is blowing from the wrong direction? It is in those times that true leadership is required. It is for those occasions that each of us who are elected leaders must step forward. It is how we react to those events and circumstances we did not plan for and over which we have no control that determines the future of our ship of state and the safety of our cargo. It is said that in such times, the pessimist simply complains about the wind. The optimist is content to wait in the harbor because he expects the direction of the wind to change. The true leader, however, gets about the task of adjusting the sails. When I addressed you for the first time in January of 2011, Georgia's ship of state had been severely battered for 2 years by the storms of the Great Recession. Our reserves, that is our rainy day fund, had been almost completely depleted in an attempt to keep our ship of state from sinking. Over $1.4 billion in that fund had been used during that 2-year period. And yet, the waves were still beating against our ship, and the winds were still blowing from the wrong direction. Our revenue had dropped by $2.3 billion from 2007 to 2011. Our unemployment rate was at 10.4%. Our prison population was the 4th largest in the country and was projected to grow by 8% over the next 5 years. Our high school graduation rate was at an unacceptable 6.5%. Georgia was losing tens of thousands of jobs, especially in the construction industry. Our manufacturing sector was at a disadvantage compared with other states because we were imposing sales tax on energy purchases. The Savannah River Deepening Project, which was authorized by Congress 12 years earlier, was at a standstill, with the real prospect that the larger vessels that would be coming through the enlarged Panama Canal would not be coming to Georgia. Many Georgians had seen their savings wiped out. Business owners were in bankruptcy court, and families were losing their homes to foreclosure. Our revered HOPE program was rapidly approaching the point of being unable to fulfill the promises to our best students. Simply put, the winds of economic change were blowing in the wrong direction, with an intensity and a duration not experienced since the Great Depression. As leaders of our state, we could have been pessimists and simply railed against the wind and make excuses for our situation. Or we could have been optimists and told our citizens just to be patient because it wouldn't last much longer. We watched some of our sister states take both approaches and conclude that until the Great Recession's wind shifted, their state governments could not operate on less revenue, and therefore their citizens must pay more taxes. Fortunately, with your support, we did not follow that pattern. Instead, we began the difficult and sometimes painful process of adjusting our sails. As a result, we grew our way out of hard times by passing conservative budgets coupled with the economic growth that was spurred by our reforms. Our rainy day fund that was almost gone 5 years ago has now grown to over $1.4 billion. By cutting taxes and removing regulatory burdens on businesses, our unemployment rate has been cut almost in half and now stands at 5.6%. And that construction industry that was hit so hard by the waves of the Great Recession now has the third lowest unemployment rate in the country at just 4%. By removing sales tax on energy for manufacturing, there have been some 22,000 new manufacturing jobs, a 6.4% increase that is more than double the growth rate of the United States. By the way, those jobs represent almost $900 million in added wages. The next step was addressing the jobs skill gap that our employers continue to encounter. As we looked at job openings around the state, we found that almost all of them could be filled if our citizens would attend one of our technical colleges and receive the necessary training. With your support over the past 3 years, we've identified 11 areas where a student will receive a 100% HOPE grant to obtain that training. These strategic industry workforce development grants cover 140 different programs. And I am recommending that this year we add industrial maintenance, an important ingredient to that list. I am proposing to devote $17.1 million in the 2017 budget for these programs. As our colleges and universities examine their degree programs and focus more of their resources on those that lead to employment, we will rapidly close the skills gap in our workforce. I am pleased that Georgia Southern University, for instance, is one of the only universities in the country and the only one in the Southeast to offer a degree program for precision engineering, yet another example of a high-demand area. In addition to directing more resources into post-secondary education programs that lead to employability, we've also moved our focus further down the education line. Our Move On When Ready legislation from last year, coupled with additional funding for dual enrollment, has greatly accelerated the pace of many students' educational journeys. This allows high school students to attend post-secondary institutions at no cost to them or their families. Currently, there are approximately 22,059 students participating in this program. My fiscal year 17 budget contains over $58.3 million to cover the cost of Move On When Ready. That is a 654% increase over fiscal year 2011. In order to further modernize our K-12 education system, I asked the State Board of Education and the University System of Georgia to allow certain high school computer science courses to count as core courses for purposes of high school graduation and college admission. Both entities have agreed, and there are currently 9 computer science courses that count towards a science or foreign language requirement. This will give us even more early learners in a field that is and will continue to be in high demand by our employers. Addressing workforce development needs extends into yet another area, and that is something we have made a priority. That is criminal justice reform. In order to curb the growth in our prison population, we created the Georgia Council on Criminal Justice Reform, which has been chaired by Judge Michael Boggs and Thomas Worthy. I want to express publicly my thanks to these 2 gentlemen and the other dedicated members of this council. Would you please join me in thanking them for their service to our state? As a result of this body passing legislation to implement the recommendations of that council in prior years, we have seen a substantial drop in our prison population as thousands of nonviolent offenders are being diverted into accountability courts, where they're given a second chance and the opportunity to receive treatments for their addictions. By converting inmates into taxpayers and by educating and giving paroled inmates marketable skills, we will begin to reduce our recidivism rates, which will in turn make our state safer. This same diversion is occurring in the juvenile justice system. In short, Georgia is recognized as the leading state in the country for meaningful criminal justice reform. There will be more recommendations from the council this year, which I ask you to consider and approve. So as you can see, we've made great progress over the past 5 years in improving and expanding the skills of our present and future workforce. But these successes are not enough. My administration has spent more of the state budget on K-12 education than any administration in the past 50 years, which included over $1 billion additional dollars for the past 2 years and an additional $416 million that you will see in fiscal year 2017's budget. However, our education boat is still leaking and needs some repairs. As we contemplated modernizing our education system, it is important to acknowledge the progress that we've made over the past 5 years. Our graduation rate from high school has increased by over 11% to 78.8%. That is an average change of 2.83% every year. As significant as that increase is, during that same 5-year period, our dropout rate has remained unyieldingly steady between 2011 and this school year. That is over 4,000 more than are currently enrolled in our entire technical college system. That is a wind that is blowing in the wrong direction, and we must continue to trim our sails to bring that dropout number down. Based on the success of our criminal justice reforms, we sought to improve and transform education in Georgia. I appointed the Education Reform Commission last January and tasked them with examining our entire education system and reporting back to me and the members of this General Assembly with bold recommendations on how we could better prepare our students for the 21st century. That report has now been submitted, and I want to thank Dr. Charles Knapp, who served as chairman of that commission, as well as the other 33 members of that commission and their support staff. Please join me in thanking them for their service. Because of the magnitude of the recommendations contained in that report, some statutory changes will be necessary to implement them fully. Other recommendations can be achieved through the budgetary process. As an example, my proposed budget provides funds to implement a new compensation model for our pre-K program in order to retain lead teachers, increase assistant teacher salaries, and maintain classroom quality. The pre-K budget recommendation is in excess of $358 billion, which includes some $26.2 million for salary increases and an additional $7.9 billion for a 3% merit pay increase. As the Education Funding Subcommittee was meeting this past year, I received a letter from the 4 legislators on that committee expressing their desire that the reporting deadline be extended for 1 additional year, that is, until August 2016. My letter response dated June the 3rd of last year extended the general reporting deadline to December the 18th, 2015. It further stated that during this 2016 session of the General Assembly, I wanted this legislative body to conduct a full review of the Commission's recommendations. And that is what I ask you to do. My budget next year will include funding to implement my recommendations and those of the Education Reform Commission. This will provide ample time to fully vet this report. It is important that we get it right. It is also important that in the meantime, the debate be conducted in good faith and that your recommendations be based on facts and not rhetoric. In order to assist you in your deliberations, I will be creating by executive order a teacher advisory committee similar to the Governor's Education Advisory Board, which I have had for the past 5 years. Now, since I've been governor, my wife and I have visited many schools throughout our state. My wife, by admission on my part, more than me. But we have been impressed by the progress of our students and by the dedication of the teachers, the principals, and the staffs of those students. Now, since both of us grew up with parents who were teachers in the Georgia public school system in different parts of the state, we know that it takes a special kind of person to be a teacher. As society has changed and technology has advanced, many of the challenges our teachers face have become more difficult. As a classroom teacher herself, Sandra was particularly aware of the evolving demands placed on teachers. As we continue to discuss the recommendations of the Education Reform Commission, it is important for teachers and administrators to know that just because we're examining ways to more appropriately allocate taxpayer dollars and put in place different models to achieve better education results, it does not mean that you are not appreciated. Just as a sailor should not be insulted when someone repairs a leak in his boat and replaces his oars with a motor, neither should our teachers take offense when we try to do the metaphorical equivalent for them. I fully understand that there are many factors that impact test scores and graduation rates, and many of these are not within the control of our teachers. A good parent that is dedicated to seeing his or her child succeed in school is the best ally a teacher can have. It really doesn't matter what the financial circumstances of those parents might be if they insist that their children go to school and arrive on time, that they do their homework, and that they not disrupt the classroom, they will be rewarded by the teachers who welcome the opportunity to work with students who do those things. So parents, I know you love your children, and you want them to succeed in life. So please, do those things, and you and your family will be richly rewarded. Over the past 5 years, members of this General Assembly and I have shown our appreciation for our teachers by making public education a priority. And we will do so again this year by appropriating an additional $300 million for K-12 education, which is more than enough to give teachers a 3% pay raise. We will distribute this money to our local school systems under the existing QBE formula. But it is our intention that your local school system pass the 3% pay raise along to you. If that does not happen, it will make it more difficult next year for the state to grant local systems more flexibility in the expenditure of state education dollars, as recommended by the Education Reform Commission. We've given local school systems large increases in funding over the past 3 years, and we've given them the flexibility to decide how to spend it. Based on a survey by the State Department of Education, 94% of school systems use those funds to reduce or eliminate furlough days. With the additional funding this year, furloughs should be a thing of the past, and teachers should receive that 3% pay raise. Now that the federal government has given states greater latitude regarding testing of students, I call upon the State Department of Education and local school systems to evaluate their testing requirements. If a test is not necessary to advance or tailor instruction, it should be eliminated. I do not suggest that tests simply be abolished because the results might be embarrassing. In fact, it is those tests that pinpoint areas in need of remediation. But tests that are duplicative and do not enhance educational achievement should be abolished. Last year, this General Assembly did just that when it made and abolished the mandated graduation exam. It was decided that if a student had successfully passed all of the required courses for graduation, they should not be denied a high school diploma based on one final test. As a result of that change, thousands of students have been able to enter the workforce, the military, or post-secondary education without the stigma of not having a high school diploma. The Education Reform Commission has recommended a student-based funding formula to replace QBE, which is over 30 years old. Instead of spending money based on rigid, impersonal criteria, they recommend that we move to a funding formula based on the characteristics of each student. For the first time, for example, poverty will be one of those characteristics to be considered. I also recommend that school systems have the flexibility to utilize the talents of their teachers in expanded ways and be able to reward them accordingly. The Gwinnett County School System, the largest and one of the most diverse systems in the state, has taken on many of these initiatives recommended by the Education Reform Commission. Under the leadership of Dr. Alvin Wilbanks, System Superintendent and CEO, Gwinnett County is embracing innovation and is developing a teacher compensation model that rewards effectiveness, promotes flexibility, and requires accountability. Superintendent Wilbanks, thanks to you for being a pioneer and doing what some are calling impossible. Your example and that of other great superintendents, administrators, and teachers throughout our state, working together will be invaluable in removing the fear associated with change. Now, there will be those who will resist change, preferring to defend the status quo. For after all, the status quo, as embodied in QBE, has been in place for the entire tenure of most of the teachers in our schools. To those who are either inflexible or cynical, I would ask them to consider the words of former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair, who made the following observation, and I quote, "The scope, speed, and scale of change demands that we educate students for a future vastly different from our past," end quote. The education of Georgia's children is too important to be held hostage to a status quo that may feel comfortable to certain adults, but is a disservice to our children. The method whereby we educate our children must be as modern and adaptive to the changes in the world as our cell phones, our computers, our televisions, and our automobiles. If it is not, our children will stumble and fall when they step onto the escalator of life right outside the schoolhouse door. Last year, this General Assembly took a major step in that direction by voting to put the Opportunity School District Constitutional Amendment on the ballot this November. Currently, there are more than 74,000 students who are required to attend chronically failing schools. That is, schools that for 3 consecutive years have failed to achieve a score above a D or an F on our standard evaluation system. Now, to put that number in perspective, that is about the same number of students currently enrolled in the University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and the University of North Georgia combined. I believe that in November, the voters of our state will help us trim our sails in order to overcome this vicious wind of chronic failure. There are other items in my proposed budget that I wish to call to your attention, and I will do so quickly. As you know, our mandated entitlement spending continues to grow through no fault of our own. Although we have seen our revenue grow, we've also seen mandated expenditures grow in the areas of healthcare and education in particular, taking up even larger segments of our overall annual budgets. In fact, the discretionary portion of the budget, which is now roughly 17%, continues to shrink. Rising healthcare costs continue to be a major factor. Consider, for example, our state health benefit plan. The state currently contributes $842 million each year for health care coverage of state employees, while also paying over $1 billion for the employer share for health insurance for teachers using the 2015 numbers. On top of that, we must also fund the state's Medicaid program and its growing roles. The cost of this program has grown from $2.6 billion in 2013 to $3.1 billion in fiscal year 17, an increase of 15.7%. Medicaid and peach care spending per Georgia family amounts to $1,258 a year. And when federal and other costs are added to that number, it amounts to at least $4,365 each year. And that is without expanding our Medicaid programs. Had we elected to expand Medicaid, would have been required that we appropriate an additional $209 million in this upcoming year's budget just to cover that added cost. And that number would only continue to grow exponentially. These numbers don't even account for the reporting requirements levied by the Affordable Care Act on the state. To demonstrate our compliance with the mandates of the federal law, we must devote $2.1 million in next year's budget just to turn in the paperwork. When you combine the cost of federal dollars to that, the total is $4.4 million. In other words, that is just what it costs for us to tell the IRS that those who are our state health benefit plan and covered by our Medicaid programs are in fact covered by insurance. I can assure you that those funds could have been better put to use rather than on bureaucratic paperwork. So if you want to carry on with our sailing metaphor, talk about something that could be thrown overboard, that's a good place to start. Once we've met our mandatory budget requirements, we must then ensure that our crew is appropriately provided for. And so we have been prioritizing and rewarding our state employees for their hard work. Just as we are budgeting for a 3% pay raise for teachers, we are also including a 3% pay raise for all other state employees. Many of them have worked very hard as the Great Recession has required the state to significantly cut the budgets of the agencies for which they work. In addition, they are seeing the number of fellow workers drop. There are 4 agencies, for example, that had over a 20% annual turnover rate last year, with the Department of Developmental Disabilities and of Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities losing almost 1/3 of their employees last year. System-wide, the turnover rate last year was 18.4%. For those agencies with the highest turnover rate, this budget allocates additional funds to be used to raise pay scales in addition to the overall 3% increase. One of the highlights of last year's legislative session was the passage of House Bill 170. Yesterday, many of you attended a rollout of the most comprehensive plans for sustainable infrastructure improvement, I believe, in the history of our state. That would not have been possible without the support of those of you who voted for House Bill 170. Over the next 18 months, approximately 60% of the user fees from that legislation will be used to repair and maintain our existing infrastructure. The remaining 40% will be used for new investments in our infrastructure. Last year, I told you that with the revenue that was available at that time, a road that was paved when you graduated from high school would not be paved again until you were eligible for Social Security. With the new user fees generated by House Bill 170, we have brought that frequency down to every 12 to 15 years with regular maintenance in between. In other words, if your road is paved the same year you graduate from high school, it will be paved at least 3 times before you're eligible for Social Security, and in the interim will be paved and maintained during that interim period. Another important state agency that we have in our state that is often overlooked is our Georgia National Guard. In addition to being recognized as the nation's #1 Army Guard unit in 2013, more than 18,000 of our guardsmen and women have been deployed since 9/11. There were some 964 of them deployed last year alone. They serve our state both at home and abroad with distinction, and they deserve our unfailing gratitude for their valor. Please join me. Although the vicious winds of the Great Recession have battered our ship of state over the past 5 years, those winds have almost subsided and are now beginning to blow in the right direction. To the members of this General Assembly, thank you for helping me trim our sails without a mutiny. And to the state employees and teachers, Thank you for your labors as you've battened down the hatches and kept us afloat. To our fellow citizens, thank you for your patience, your support, and your hard work as we battle those storms together. Now, we're ready to unfurl our sails and set forth on this year's ocean of opportunity. As it lies before us, we're going to lead the way for others to follow, with number one proudly emblazoned on our mast. To the members of the General Assembly, may God grant you wisdom in your deliberations, and may He continue to bless our great state of Georgia.
This is the state of
Will
the
the
state
committee
address
of
in the
escort
state
please
of
escort
Georgia.
the Honorable Nathan Deal, Governor of Georgia, and his distinguished guest from the chamber.
This is a live broadcast, and Governor Nathan Deal is now leaving the House chamber.
This time, the chair recognizes the distinguished majority leader of this House for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, this time I would make a motion to this joint session of the House and Senate. Make a motion this joint session be dissolved and move on.
Majority Leader Burns, the new majority leader in the House, has moved that this joint session of the Georgia General Assembly be dissolved. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes clearly have it, and this joint session is hereby dissolved.